They say a mother's love is unconditional. But what happens when that love is used as a tool, a prop in someone else's selfish game? My son asked me to be his fake fiancée. Not for love, not for family, but for money. And when I discovered why, it broke something inside me that I didn't know could break. My name is Margaret Thomas, but everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 68 years old, and I've been living alone in this little house for 3 years now, ever since my Robert passed. The house isn't much to look at from the outside. Just a small brick ranch with white shutters that need painting, and a garden I tend every morning when my knees allow it. But it's mine. Robert and I bought it 40 years ago when Daniel was just a baby, and every corner holds a memory. These days, the house feels too big and too quiet all at once. I fill the silence with the television during meals, gospel music while I clean, and phone calls to my church friends on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. It's a routine that keeps me going, keeps me from thinking too much about how different things turned out from what I imagined. I raised my son in this house. I worked double shifts at Mercy Hospital for 30 years as a nurse, coming home with aching feet and a tired back, but always making sure Daniel had everything he needed. Robert worked at the Postal Service until his heart started acting up, and together we made sure our boy had opportunities we never had. We sent him to college. We were so proud when he graduated and got that job at the big accounting firm downtown. But somewhere along the way, Daniel got busy. First it was every other weekend, then once a month, then just holidays, then not even that. The phone calls got shorter, his voice more distant. "I'm sorry, Ma, I've got a meeting. Can't talk right now, Ma, I'm on deadline. Maybe next month, Ma, always next month. Next month never comes." On this particular Tuesday morning in late October, I was kneeling in my garden, pulling weeds from around my rose bushes, when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked up, shielding my eyes from the sun, and saw a silver sedan I didn't recognize. My heart did a little jump when the driver's door opened and Daniel stepped out. My son is 42 now, tall like his father was, with close cropped hair that's just starting to gray at the temples. He was wearing one of those expensive suits he likes, navy blue with a crisp white shirt, and he had his phone in his hand like always. "Daniel," I called out, struggling to get to my feet. My knees don't work like they used to. "Baby, what are you doing here?" He glanced up from his phone, and I saw something flash across his face. Was it annoyance? But then he smiled, that charming smile that used to light up my whole world when he was a boy. "Hey, Ma. Thought I'd stop by. You got a minute?" I brushed the dirt from my gardening gloves and hurried toward him as fast as my legs would carry me. When was the last time I'd seen him? Easter? No, it was before that. Valentine's Day, and he'd only stayed for 20 minutes. "Of course I have a minute! I have all day. Come inside, baby, let me fix you something to eat. Are you hungry? I made my chicken salad yesterday, and I've got that pound cake you always loved." "Ma, slow down," he said, holding up his hand. His eyes were scanning the front of the house, the yard, like he was evaluating something. "I can't stay long, I just need to talk to you about something." My smile faltered a little, but I held on to it. "Well, come on in then. No sense standing out here in the heat." Inside, the house was cool and dark. I'd pulled the curtains against the afternoon sun. I led Daniel to the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd fed him breakfast before school for 18 years, where Robert and I had coffee every morning, where I now ate dinner alone every night. Sit down," I said, pulling out a chair at the small table. "Let me get you some sweet tea." "I'm fine, Ma." Daniel remained standing, checking his phone again. He'd been in my house less than 2 minutes, and he'd already looked at that screen 3 times. I poured myself a glass of tea with shaking hands. I was nervous, I realized, nervous in front of my own son. When had that happened? "So," I said, sitting down across from where he stood, "what brings you by? Is everything okay? You're not sick or anything?" "No, I'm fine." He finally put his phone in his pocket and looked at me directly. "Actually, I need a favor." "A favor?" "Not, I missed you, Ma. Not, I wanted to see how you're doing. A favor." But I pushed that hurt down deep where I'd learned to put all the other hurts. I smiled up at my son, my only child, and said, "Of course, baby. Anything. What do you need?" Daniel pulled out the chair and sat down. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, and gave me that smile again. "Okay, so this is going to sound a little strange. But hear me out." My heart started beating faster. "Strange how?" "There's this dinner," he began. "A company thing. Very important. My boss, Mr. Harrison, you remember me talking about him?" I nodded, though I couldn't recall Daniel ever really talking to me about his work. He used to, years ago when he first started. But not anymore. Well, Mr. Harrison is a traditional guy, old school. He really values family, people who take care of their loved ones. And there's an opportunity coming up at work, a big one, and I need to make a good impression. I wasn't following. That's wonderful, baby. But what does that have to do with me? Daniel reached across the table and took my hand. His palm was smooth, nothing like Robert's working hands had been. I need you to come to this dinner with me. And I need you to, well, I need you to pretend to be engaged. I blinked. Engaged. Engaged to who? To a gentleman who works for the company. His name is William. He's a nice man, around your age, very respectable. It's just for one evening, just for the dinner. We just need you to act like you're his fiancée, like you're planning a wedding. That's it. I pulled my hand back slowly. Daniel, I don't understand. Why would I pretend to be engaged to a stranger? He sat back in his chair, and I could see him measuring his words. Look, it's complicated. But basically Mr. Harrison really respects William, and if he sees that William is settling down, taking care of finding a good woman, being part of a family unit, it reflects well on all of us. It shows we're stable, responsible people. But I don't know this William person. Why doesn't he find his own fiancée? He's shy, Ma. He's not good with women. But he's a good guy, I promise. And it would really help me out. This opportunity, it could change everything for me. I could finally buy that house I've been wanting. Could finally be comfortable. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, and I saw the little boy who used to crawl into my lap when he had a nightmare. I saw the teenager who'd made me proud at his graduation. I saw all the dreams I'd had for him. And I heard myself say, "Okay, baby, if it's that important to you, I'll do it." The relief on his face was immediate. He stood up, came around the table, and kissed the top of my head quickly. "Thanks, Ma, you're the best. The dinner is this Saturday at 7. I'll pick you up at 6:30. Wear something nice, okay? Like that blue dress you wore to Aunt Jean's funeral. Saturday. That's only 4 days away. I know it's short notice, but you'll be fine. Just be yourself, smile, hold William's hand a few times. Easy." He was already heading toward the door, pulling his phone back out. "I gotta run. Big meeting this afternoon. Daniel, wait." I started to rise, but he was already gone. I heard the front door open and close, heard his car engine start. Through the kitchen window, I watched him back out of the driveway without looking back at the house. I sat there in my quiet kitchen for a long time after he left, my untouched sweet tea getting watery from the melting ice. Something didn't feel right about this. A mother's intuition, maybe. Or maybe just the sadness of realizing that after months of not hearing from my son, he'd only come to ask me for something. But he'd asked. He'd needed me. And isn't that what I'd been waiting for? To be needed by him again. I picked up my tea and took a sip, pushing down the uneasy feeling in my chest. It was just one dinner. One evening. What harm could it do? If only I'd known then what I know now. If only I'd trusted that feeling in my gut that was screaming at me that something was very, very wrong. The days between Tuesday and Saturday moved both too fast and too slow. I found myself standing in front of my closet Wednesday morning, staring at the blue dress Daniel had mentioned. It was a simple thing, modest, with long sleeves and a hem that fell below my knees. I'd bought it for my sister Jean's funeral 2 years ago, and I hadn't worn it since. I took it out and held it up to myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was older than I felt inside. When did I get so many wrinkles around my eyes? When did my hair go completely gray? I kept it natural now, twisted into a bun most days, though I used to press it straight for special occasions when Robert was alive. "You're going to pretend to be engaged," I said to my reflection. The words sounded absurd out loud. At 8 years old, you're going to play pretend like a child. But it was for Daniel. And hadn't I always done everything for Daniel? That afternoon, Claire Rodriguez came by for her weekly visit. Claire was a home health aide who checked on several elderly folks in the neighborhood. She'd been coming to see me for about 6 months now, ever since I had that fall in the bathroom and Mrs. Patterson from next door called the agency. I didn't really need the help. I could manage fine on my own, but the company was nice, and Claire had become something of a friend. She was a small woman, maybe 5'2". With dark curly hair she wore in a ponytail and warm brown eyes that always seemed to see right through whatever brave face you were trying to put on. She couldn't have been more than 35. With 2 kids of her own she was raising by herself after her husband left. "Miss Maggie?" she called out as she let herself in with the key I'd given her. you here?" "In the living room, honey," I called back. Claire came in carrying her usual bag of supplies, though she knew I rarely needed them. She took one look at me sitting on the couch with that blue dress draped across my lap and stopped in her tracks. "What's going on?" "You got somewhere special to go." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to tell her everything, but another part, the part that was still clinging to the hope that my son actually wanted to spend time with me, held back. "Daniel's taking me to a dinner on Saturday," I said. "A work thing." Claire's eyebrows went up. "Daniel, your son Daniel, the one who hasn't visited since, when was it? February." "He's busy," I said automatically, the same excuse I'd been making for years. "He's got an important job." Claire sat down next to me, her voice gentle but firm. "And this dinner, tell me about it." Maybe it was the way she asked, without judgment but with genuine concern. Or maybe it was because I'd been turning this over in my mind for 2 days and needed to hear how it sounded when I said it out loud. Either way, I found myself telling her everything, about Daniel's request, about this William person I'd never met, about pretending to be engaged. When I finished, Claire was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Miss Maggie, does this sound right to you?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, why would a grown man need his mother to pretend to be engaged to a stranger? For a work dinner? That doesn't make any sense." I felt defensive suddenly, protective of Daniel, even though the same questions had been bouncing around in my own head. "He said it was important. Something about his boss valuing family. But you're not this Williams family. You've never even met him." Claire turned to face me fully. "And another thing, if Daniel wanted to show his boss he values family, why doesn't he just bring you as his mother? Why the pretend engagement?" I don't know. He said it was complicated." Claire reached over and took my hand. "Miss Maggie, I love you like you were my own mama. You know that, right? And because I love you, I'm going to say this straight. Something about this doesn't smell right." "He's my son, Claire." "I know he is. But that doesn't mean he's always going to do right by you. You've told me yourself how he barely calls, how he never visits. And now suddenly he shows up needing a favor. You don't find that suspicious?" I pulled my hand away, suddenly angry. "So what are you saying? That I should tell him no? That I should refuse the one thing he's asked of me in months? I'm saying you should ask more questions before you agree to something that could." "Could what?" "Embarrass me. I've been embarrassed before. Could hurt me. I'm already hurt every day that my son doesn't call. At least this way I get to see him. At least this way I'm useful to him for something." The words came out sharper than I'd intended, and I saw Claire's face fall. She stood up slowly, gathering her bag. "I'm sorry, Miss Maggie. I didn't mean to upset you. I just worry about you, that's all." "I know," I said, my anger deflating as quickly as it had risen. "I'm sorry too, honey. I shouldn't have snapped at you." "It's okay." She headed toward the door, then paused. "Just promise me something. Promise me you'll be careful on Saturday. Keep your eyes open. If anything feels wrong, you call me. Doesn't matter what time, you call me, okay?" I agreed, though I couldn't imagine what could possibly go wrong at a simple dinner. After Claire left, the house felt even quieter than usual. I hung the blue dress back in my closet and tried to go about my normal routine, fixing dinner, watching my evening shows, reading my devotional before bed. But Claire's words kept echoing in my head. Thursday morning, I called Daniel. I told myself I just wanted to confirm the details, but really, I needed to hear his voice, needed reassurance that I was doing the right thing. His phone rang 5 times before going to voicemail. "You've reached Daniel Thomas. Leave a message." "Hi, baby, it's your mother," I said, hating how uncertain I sounded. "Just wanted to check in about Saturday. What time did you say again, and should I bring anything? Call me back when you get a chance. Love you." He didn't call back Thursday, or Friday. By Saturday afternoon, I still hadn't heard from him, and I was starting to panic. Was the dinner still on? Had he changed his mind? Maybe this whole thing had been some kind of joke, or maybe he'd found someone else to do it. I tried calling 2 more times, leaving increasingly desperate messages. Around 4 o'clock, my phone finally rang. "Ma, hey, sorry I've been swamped," Daniel said without preamble. No greeting, no acknowledgement of my messages. "I'm still picking you up at 6:30. Be ready." "Daniel, I've been trying to reach you'd." I know, I got your messages. Look, I really can't talk right now. Just be ready at 6:30. Wear the blue dress. And smile, okay? Try to look happy." He hung up before I could say anything else. I stood there holding the phone, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. Try to look happy. Like I was a doll he was dressing up for display. But I pushed that thought away. I went upstairs, took a long bath, and carefully got dressed. I did my makeup the way I used to when Robert would take me out. A little foundation to even out my skin, some powder, a touch of lipstick. I looked at myself in the mirror again and practiced smiling. "You're gonna meet William tonight," I told my reflection. "You're gonna be charming and pleasant and make your son proud." At exactly 6:30, I heard Daniel's car in the driveway. I grabbed my purse and my jacket and went outside before he could honk. The evening air was cool, smelling of autumn leaves and someone's fireplace burning somewhere down the street. Daniel got out of the car and looked me over, nodding. "You look good, Ma." "Perfect. Thank you, baby." "You look handsome." He did, in a charcoal suit with a burgundy tie. He opened the passenger door for me, which surprised me. Daniel hadn't opened a door for me in years. As I settled into the leather seat, I caught a whiff of his cologne, expensive and unfamiliar. "So," I said as he pulled out of the driveway, "tell me about William. What's he like?" "She's nice. Quiet, works hard." "What does he do?" "In transportation." "Is he nervous about tonight?" "About this situation." Daniel glanced over at me quickly, then back at the road. "He's fine with it. Look, Ma, when we get there, just let me do most of the talking, okay? You just need to smile, maybe hold his hand when we're at the table, laugh at his jokes, normal fiancé stuff." "Normal fiancé stuff?" I repeated. "Daniel, I still don't understand why." "Ma, please. Not now. Can you just trust me on this? It's important. It's really, really important." There was something in his voice, something desperate that I'd never heard before. And because I was his mother, because I'd spent 68 years learning to push my own doubts aside for the people I loved, I nodded. "Okay, baby. I trust you." He reached over and patted my hand. "Thanks, Ma. You won't regret this." But as we drove through the darkening streets toward whatever was waiting for me, Claire's warning echoed in my head, "Keep your eyes open. If anything feels wrong, you call me." I watched the familiar neighborhoods give way to the fancy part of town, where the restaurants had valet parking and doormen in uniforms. And I wondered, for the first time in my life, if trusting my son was a mistake. The restaurant was called the Sterling Room, and it was the kind of place I'd only ever seen in magazines. Daniel pulled up to a valet stand where a young man in a crisp uniform hurried to open my door. The building itself was all glass and steel, with soft golden light spilling out onto the sidewalk. "Come on, Ma," Daniel said, offering me his arm. I took it, grateful for the support as we walked toward the entrance. My legs were shaking, though whether from nerves or just the chill in the air, I couldn't say. Inside, the restaurant was even more impressive. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings. The tables were draped in white linen, and soft piano music played from somewhere I couldn't see. Everyone was dressed like they'd stepped out of a fashion show. Sleek dresses, tailored suits, jewelry that probably cost more than my car. I felt suddenly, painfully out of place in my funeral dress. A hostess in a black dress approached us with a bright smile. "Good evening. Are you here for the Harrison party?" "Yes," Daniel said. "Daniel Thomas and his mother Margaret." The hostess checked her list and nodded. "Right this way, please." She led us through the main dining room to a private section in the back, where a large table was set for about 15 people. Several guests were already seated, chatting and laughing with wine glasses in their hands. At the head of the table sat an elderly white man with silver hair and a stern face. Mr. Harrison, I assumed. Daniel, a middle-aged woman in a burgundy dress, waved us over. "So glad you could make it. And this must be my mother, Margaret," Daniel said smoothly. "Ma, this is Jennifer Cole, Mr. Harrison's executive assistant." "Lovely to meet you," I said, extending my hand. Jennifer shook it with a firm grip, her eyes assessing me in a way that made me feel like I was being measured for something. "Please, have a seat," Jennifer said. "We're just waiting for a few more people before we get started." Daniel guided me to 2 empty chairs near the middle of the table. I sat down carefully, hyper-aware of every movement, every sound. The chair was plush, covered in velvet. The place setting in front of me had more forks and spoons than I knew what to do with. "Relax, Ma," Daniel whispered, leaning close. "You're doing great." But I didn't feel great. I felt like an imposter. And where was this William person I was supposed to be engaged to? As if summoned by my thoughts, the hostess returned, leading an elderly black man toward our section. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, with gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a simple black suit that looked a bit worn at the elbows, and he carried himself with a quiet dignity. "Ah, William, Mr. Harrison's voice boomed from the head of the table. There you are. Come sit down. We're about to order. The man, William, nodded respectfully and made his way toward us. When he got closer, I could see the confusion in his eyes as he looked at Daniel, then at me, then back at Daniel. Daniel stood quickly and extended his hand. William, good to see you. This is my mother, Margaret Thomas. Ma, this is William Porter. I stood as well, offering my hand. William took it gently, and I felt the caluses on his palm, working hands like Robert's had been. It's very nice to meet you, Mrs. Thomas, he said softly. His voice was deep and measured, with a hint of a southern accent. Please call me Maggie, I said, searching his face for some clue about what I was supposed to do next. William sat down in the chair next to mine, and Daniel sat on my other side. For a moment, nobody said anything. Then Daniel leaned across me and said to William, "Thank you for doing this. I know it's a bit unusual." William's brow furrowed. "I'm not sure I understand. Let's just get through dinner." Daniel cut him off with a tight smile. "We can talk after." I looked at William, and he looked at me, and I saw in his eyes the same confusion and discomfort I was feeling. Whatever this was, he hadn't been given much more information than I had. The waiters began taking orders, and I barely heard what I asked for. My mind was racing. Something was very wrong here. Why would Daniel bring me to his boss's dinner and introduce me to William like this? And why did William seem just as confused as I was? As the first course arrived, some kind of fancy soup with herbs floating on top, Mr. Harrison stood and tapped his wine glass with a fork. "Thank you all for joining me tonight," he began, his voice commanding attention. "As you know, I've been thinking a great deal about the future of Harrison and Associates. I'm not getting any younger, and it's time to start planning for succession." A hush fell over the table. Everyone leaned forward slightly, hanging on his words. "I've spent 40 years building this company, and I want to ensure it goes into the right hands. Hands that understand what really matters in life, not just profit margins and quarterly reports, but integrity, family, and commitment." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the faces at the table. When his eyes landed on Daniel, I saw my son sit up straighter, that charming smile fixed on his face. "Over the next few months, Mr. Harrison continued, I'll be evaluating members of my senior team to determine who will take over as managing partner when I retire. I'll be looking at your work, yes, but also at your character, at how you treat others, at what kind of people you are outside this office." He raised his glass. "So tonight, let's not talk about business. Let's talk about what makes us human. Our families, our loves, our lives." Everyone raised their glasses and drank. I lifted mine too, though my hand was trembling. Next to me, I felt William shift uncomfortably in his seat. As the dinner progressed, conversations broke out around the table. Mr. Harrison's assistant Jennifer was talking about her daughter's college graduation. Another man was showing photos of his grandchildren on his phone. And Daniel, I noticed, kept trying to steer conversations toward himself. "Yes, I've been very focused on building stability in my life," he was saying to the woman across from us. "Making sure I'm there for my family, taking care of my mother." He reached over and patted my hand, a gesture that would have looked affectionate to anyone watching but felt cold and calculated to me. "That's wonderful," the woman said. "Family is so important." "It really is," Daniel agreed. "In fact, I'm happy to announce that my mother here just got engaged." "Isn't that right?" My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Everyone at our end of the table turned to look at me. Yes," I heard myself say, my voice small. "To William here," Daniel continued, gesturing to the man beside me. "They've been seeing each other for a while now, and William finally popped the question. We're all very excited." William went completely still. I could feel the tension radiating off him. When I dared to glance his way, I saw his jaw was clenched tight. "Congratulations," Jennifer called from down the table. "That's lovely news." "William, you old romantic, I didn't know you had it in you." Laughter rippled around the table. Mr. Harrison was nodding approvingly, a small smile on his stern face. "How did you two meet?" another woman asked. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I didn't know what to say. I looked desperately at Daniel, at William, at anyone who might help me. "Actually," William said quietly, "I think there's been some misunderstanding. They met through me." Daniel jumped in quickly, his hand tightening on my shoulder in what I'm sure looked like affection but felt like a warning. "I introduced them about 6 months ago. Ma was lonely after my father passed, and William is one of the kindest men I know. It just made sense." The lies fell from my son's mouth so easily, so smoothly, that I felt physically sick. 6 months ago. I'd never laid eyes on William Porter until 15 minutes ago. That's so sweet that you brought them together, Jennifer said to Daniel. You must be a very caring son. I try to be, Daniel said, and I heard something in his voice, pride, satisfaction, like he just won something. And that's when I understood. This wasn't about William at all. This was about Daniel. He was using me, using both of us to make himself look good in front of his boss, to appear to be the kind of caring, family-oriented man that Mr. Harrison valued. I was a prop, a costume piece in my son's performance. The realization hit me so hard I almost couldn't breathe. I set my fork down carefully, afraid I might drop it. Beside me, William was staring straight ahead, his jaw still clenched. "Excuse me," I whispered. "I need to use the restroom." I stood on shaking legs and walked as steadily as I could toward the back of the restaurant. I could feel eyes following me, could hear Daniel call out, "You okay, Ma?" in that fake concerned voice. I pushed through the door marked "Ladies," and barely made it to the sink before my knees gave out. I gripped the marble counter, staring at myself in the ornate mirror. The woman looking back at me had tears in her eyes, but she hadn't let them fall yet. She was still holding it together, barely. The door opened behind me, and I expected to see one of the women from dinner checking on me. Instead, it was William Porter, looking deeply uncomfortable but determined. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thomas," he said. "I know I shouldn't be in here, but I need to talk to you. I need you to know, I didn't agree to any of this." I turned to face him. "You didn't know either. Daniel approached me yesterday. Said his mother needed an escort to accompany dinner, that you were nervous about coming alone and would feel more comfortable with someone your own age accompanying you. He offered me $500 to be your date for the evening. That's all. Nothing about an engagement, nothing about any of this. $500. My son had paid this man $500 to pretend to be interested in me. He's using us," I said, my voice breaking. "He's using us to impress his boss." William nodded slowly. "I'm afraid so, ma'am, and I'm ashamed to say I took the money. I drive Mr. Harrison around most days. I'm his chauffeur, and $500 is a lot to me. But I never would have agreed if I'd known what he was really planning." "His chauffeur," I repeated. Daniel had said William was in transportation. Another lie, making it sound like something more than it was. "I'm going to go back out there and tell them the truth," William said firmly. "This isn't right. You don't deserve to be treated this way." I looked at this stranger, this good man who was willing to give up $500 he probably desperately needed, just to protect me from humiliation, and I thought about my son who had driven me here knowing exactly what he was going to do, who had looked me in the eye and lied without hesitation. "Wait," I said. "Before you do that, I need to know something. What exactly did Daniel tell you about why he was doing this? Did he mention anything about Mr. Harrison's succession plan?" William hesitated, then nodded. "He mentioned that Mr. Harrison was looking for someone with strong character to take over the company. Someone who values family and takes care of people. I got the impression he was trying to position himself as that person. Be making himself look like the devoted son who brought his lonely mother together with a nice man." I felt something hard and cold settling in my chest, replacing the shock and hurt. "He's using us both to fool his boss into thinking he's someone he's not." "I won't be part of it," William said. "I'll go tell them right now." I grabbed his arm. "Not yet, please, I need to think. Mrs. Thomas." "Please call me Maggie." "Maggie," he said gently, "you don't have to protect him. What he's doing is wrong." "I know it is," I said. "But if we expose him now, in front of all those people, I just need a minute to think." William studied my face, then nodded. "All right. But I want you to know, whatever you decide, I'm on your side, not his." "Thank you," I whispered. He left the restroom first, to avoid any appearance of impropriety. I stood there for another moment, staring at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me had changed in the last hour. She looked older, sadder, but also somehow stronger. I thought about all the years I'd made excuses for Daniel. All the times I'd told myself he was just busy, just focused on his career, just trying to make something of himself. I'd been so proud of him for getting away from our modest life, for becoming successful. But what had he become, really? A man who would lie to his own mother. A man who would use her as a tool. A man who thought $500 could buy someone's dignity. I washed my hands slowly, carefully reapplied my lipstick, and straightened my dress. Then I walked back to that table with my head high. I wasn't going to make a scene. Not yet. But I wasn't gonna play along anymore either. When I sat back down, Daniel leaned over immediately. You okay, Mai? You were gone a while. I'm fine, I said, my voice steady. Mr. Harrison was just asking about you and William. I told him about how you're planning a small ceremony, nothing fancy. Daniel, I interrupted quietly. We need to talk. After dinner. Alone. Something flickered in his eyes. Ma, whatever it is can wait. No, I said, looking him directly in the eye. It can't. For the rest of the dinner, I barely spoke. I answered questions when directly addressed, smiled when appropriate, but I didn't elaborate on any of Daniel's lies. When Jennifer asked about wedding plans, I simply said, we're still figuring things out. When Mr. Harrison asked William how he planned to keep me happy, William said carefully, by treating her with the respect she deserves. And I saw the older man nod approvingly, but I also saw things I hadn't noticed before. I saw how Daniel dominated conversations, always bringing them back to himself. I saw how the other people at the table, his colleagues, exchanged glances when he talked, little looks that suggested they might know something about him that I didn't. I saw Mr. Harrison watching everyone, those sharp eyes missing nothing, and I realized that my son might not be as secure in his position as he thought he was. Finally, mercifully, the dinner ended. Mr. Harrison stood and thanked everyone for coming. As people began to gather their things and say their goodbyes, I felt Daniel's hand on my elbow. Let me walk you to the car, Ma, he said. Actually, William spoke up. Might I have a word with both of you? Just for a moment. Daniel's smile tightened. I really need to get my mother home. It won't take long, William said firmly. The three of us stepped outside into the cool night air. The valet was helping other guests, giving us a moment of relative privacy. Daniel immediately pulled out his phone, but William spoke before he could get distracted. Daniel, what you did tonight was wrong. My son's head snapped up. Excuse me. You used your mother. You used me. You lied to everyone in that room. And you did it all to make yourself look good for a promotion. Now wait just a minute. No, you wait, William said, and there was steel in his voice now. I've driven Mr. Harrison for 7 years. I know what kind of man he is. He values honesty above everything. And when he finds out what you did tonight, and he will find out, because I'm going to tell him, you can kiss that promotion goodbye. Daniel's face went red. You signed up for this. I paid you. You paid me to escort your mother to dinner, not to participate in fraud. There's a difference. This is none of your business, old man. Stop, I said quietly. Both men turned to look at me. Just stop. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, this person I barely recognized. Daniel, why did you really bring me here tonight? Ma, I told you. Tell me the truth. For once in your life, tell me the truth. He stared at me for a long moment. Then something in his face hardened. Fine. You want the truth. Mr. Harrison is looking for someone to take over his company. Someone with character. Someone who puts family first. Someone with values. I needed to show him I was that person. Be lying. Be being smart. His voice rose and a valet looked over at us. Daniel lowered his voice. This is $1 million opportunity. Maybe more. I needed to show him that I'm the kind of man who takes care of his family, who helps his aging mother find companionship. Is that so terrible? You could have just brought me as your mother. You could have just spent time with me. That would have shown him you care about family. It wouldn't have been enough. Don't you get it? Everyone there has a family. Everyone there takes care of their parents. I needed to stand out. I needed to show that I go above and beyond. Be turning me into a liar. My voice cracked. Be putting on a show with someone else's dignity. I knew you'd make it about feelings, Daniel said, frustration clear in his voice. This is business, Ma. This is my future. And all I asked was for you to play along for a few hours. Was that really so much? I looked at my son and I saw him clearly for the first time in years. Maybe for the first time ever. Yes, Daniel. It was too much. Because you asked me to betray myself. You asked me to lie, to help you lie, to be part of something dishonest. And you didn't even think twice about it. Oh, come on. When did you become this person? I asked, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. When did you become someone who thinks the end justifies the means? Someone who uses people? I'm trying to be successful! I'm trying to make something of myself! Isn't that what you always wanted for me? Not like this? I whispered. Never like this. Daniel looked between me and William, and I saw something ugly twist his features. Fine, you know what? Fine. Go ahead and tell Mr. Harrison whatever you want. Ruin this for me. That's what you've always done anyway. held me back, made me feel guilty for wanting more than what you and Dad had. Each word was like a knife. Daniel, no, let's be honest here. You've been guilt-tripping me for years about not visiting enough, not calling enough. But maybe I don't visit because I don't want to end up like you. Stuck in that same little house, living that same small life. I wanted more. I deserved more. All I ever wanted, I said through my tears, was for you to be a good man. That was all. Not rich, not powerful, just good. But you're not, are you? The silence that followed was devastating. Daniel stared at me and I saw something shift in his eyes, maybe regret, maybe just calculation about what to say next. But William spoke first. Mrs. Thomas, Maggie let me drive you home. You shouldn't have to ride with him tonight. She's my mother, Daniel snapped. I brought her. I'll take her home. No, I said quietly. I'd like William to drive me, please. Daniel's face went hard. Fine, whatever. I'll call you tomorrow when you've calmed down. Don't, I said. Don't call me, Daniel. Not for a while. He looked like I'd slapped him. Good. Maybe he needed to feel a fraction of the pain he'd just caused me. Without another word, my son turned and walked to his car. I watched him drive away, and part of me, the mother part that had held him as a baby, that had kissed his scraped knees, that had been so proud at his graduation, broke into pieces. William gently touched my elbow. Come on, my car is just over here. As we walked to his modest sedan, so different from Daniel's expensive car, I heard footsteps behind us. I turned to see Mr. Harrison himself standing there, his chauffeur having just brought his town car around. Mrs. Thomas, he said quietly, I apologize, but I couldn't help overhearing some of that conversation. My heart sank. Of course he'd heard. Of course Daniel's carefully constructed performance had just fallen apart right in front of the person he'd been trying to impress. Mr. Harrison, I'm so sorry, I began. I didn't know what Daniel was planning, I swear. He held up a hand. You have nothing to apologize for. But I'd like to know, is what I heard true? Were you and William not actually engaged? Was this entire evening orchestrated by my employee to deceive me? I looked at this powerful man, and I thought about lying one more time to protect my son. But I was so tired of lies. Yes, sir, I said. It was all a setup. I met William for the first time tonight. Daniel told me one thing, told William another, and put us both in an impossible situation. I'm truly sorry you were dragged into this. Mr. Harrison was quiet for a moment. Then he said, William, thank you for being honest with me. I'll see you Monday morning. We have some things to discuss, but none of them negative. I appreciate integrity when I see it. William nodded, looking relieved. Then Mr. Harrison turned to me. Mrs. Thomas, I've been in business for 40 years. I've seen every trick, every scheme, every attempt to manipulate me, and I've learned to spot them from a mile away. I suspected something wasn't quite right tonight, but I wanted to see how it would play out. I'm sorry you were put in this position. What are you going to do about Daniel? Mr. Harrison's expression was unreadable. That's between him and me, but I will say this. Character matters, Mrs. Thomas. How we treat the people who can't do anything for us, that's who we really are. Your son failed that test tonight, spectacularly. He tipped his head politely and walked to his car. I watched him drive away, and then the weight of the entire evening crashed down on me. My legs gave out, and if William hadn't caught me, I would have fallen right there in the parking lot. I've got you, he said gently. Come on, let's get you home. As we drove through the dark streets, I stared out the window and cried quietly. William didn't try to make conversation or tell me it would be okay. He just drove carefully and handed me a clean handkerchief from his pocket when mine was soaked through. When we finally pulled up in front of my little house with its white shutters and overgrown garden, I felt like I'd been gone for years instead of hours. Thank you, William, I said, for being honest, for protecting me, for being a gentleman when my own son forgot how to be one. You're welcome, Maggie, and I'm truly sorry you had to go through this. It's not your fault. I opened the door, then paused. Can I ask you something? Why did you need that $500 so badly? William smiled sadly. My granddaughter. She's in her first year of college. Smart as a whip. I help out when I can. Of course he did. Because he was the kind of man who would help his family without asking them to compromise their dignity for it. I went inside my empty house and closed the door. The silence was deafening. I walked through the dark living room, past the photos on the mantel. Daniel's baby pictures, his graduation photo, pictures of a family that didn't exist anymore. In my bedroom, I carefully took off the blue funeral dress and hung it back in the closet. I washed off my makeup and brushed my teeth and went through all the normal motions of getting ready for bed. But nothing was normal anymore. Everything had changed. As I lay in the dark, I thought about what Daniel had said. Maybe I don't visit because I don't want to end up like you, stuck in that same little house, living that same small life. He thought my life was small. But he was wrong. My life had been full of love and sacrifice and honesty and hard work. I'd raised him in this house. I'd loved his father in this house. I'd built a life here that meant something. It wasn't small. It was just too full of real things for him to see the value anymore. I fell asleep crying, and I dreamed of the little boy who used to crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms, who had needed his mother to chase away the monsters. But when I woke up in the morning, I knew that little boy was gone. In his place was a man I didn't know and wasn't sure I wanted to. Sunday morning. I woke up with swollen eyes and a headache that pounded behind my temples. For a moment, lying there in the gray dawn light filtering through my curtains, I thought maybe it had all been a bad dream. But then I saw the blue dress hanging on my closet door where I'd left it, and everything came rushing back. My son had used me. My son had lied to me. My son had said my life was small. I got out of bed slowly, my body aching like I'd been in a physical fight instead of an emotional one. In the bathroom mirror, I looked like I'd aged 10 years overnight. My eyes were puffy, my face drawn. I splashed cold water on my face and tried to pull myself together. The house felt different that morning. Emptier somehow, even though it had always been just me living here. I made coffee out of habit, but it tasted bitter and I couldn't finish the cup. I tried to eat some toast, but it stuck in my throat. My phone sat on the kitchen table, silent. Part of me kept waiting for it to ring, for Daniel to call and apologize, to tell me he'd been under too much pressure and had made a terrible mistake. But it didn't ring. Around 10 o'clock, there was a knock at my door. My heart jumped. Maybe it was Daniel, maybe he'd come to make things right. But when I opened it, I found Claire standing on my porch with a concerned look on her face and a covered dish in her hands. "Miss Maggie," she said softly, "I've been worried about you since yesterday. I brought you some enchiladas." I must have looked terrible because Claire's expression immediately shifted from concern to alarmed. "Oh, honey, what happened? Come here." She set the dish down on the porch railing and pulled me into a hug right there in the doorway. And I broke. I sobbed into her shoulder like a child, all the hurt and betrayal and heartbreak pouring out of me. Claire held me tight, making soothing sounds and rubbing my back until I could breathe again. "Come on," she said, guiding me back inside. "Sit down and tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the dinner, about William, about Daniel's lies and Mr. Harrison overhearing the truth. I told her about what Daniel had said in the parking lot, about how he thought my life was small and that I'd held him back. Claire listened without interrupting, her face growing more and more angry as the story went on. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and said a word in Spanish that I didn't understand but got the general meaning of. "That boy," she said, her voice tight with fury. "That ungrateful, selfish boy. After everything you did for him. He's right though, isn't he?" I said quietly. "I do live a small life. I never went anywhere or did anything important. I was just a nurse, just a mother. Maybe he is better off without me dragging him down." "Stop that." Claire reached across the table and gripped my hand hard. "Stop that right now. You listen to me, Miss Maggie. You worked yourself to the bone to give that boy every opportunity. You sacrificed so he could have what you didn't. You loved him with everything you had. There is nothing small about that. Nothing. But he doesn't see it that way. That's his failure, not yours. He's so focused on money and status and impressing people that he can't see what real value looks like anymore. That's not on you. That's on him and the choices he made." I wanted to believe her, but the words Daniel had said kept echoing in my head. "He hasn't called," I said. "Not even to see if I got home okay. Do you want him to call?" I thought about that. Did I? I don't know. Part of me wants him to call and apologize, to tell me he didn't mean any of it. But another part of me, Claire, I don't know if I can forgive this. Is that wrong? Is it wrong for a mother to not forgive her child? Claire was quiet for a moment. "I think," she said carefully, "that forgiveness doesn't mean pretending something didn't happen. It doesn't mean letting someone keep hurting you. You can forgive someone and still protect yourself from them. But he's my son. And that means he should treat you better, not worse. Being family doesn't give him the right to use you." We sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee that had gone cold. Finally, Claire said, What are you going to do now? I don't know. Wait, I guess. See if he calls. See what he says. And if he doesn't call? That question hung in the air between us. What if he didn't call? What if last night had broken something that couldn't be fixed? Then I guess I'll know where I stand, I said finally. Claire stayed with me most of the day. She heated up the enchiladas for lunch, and we watched some cooking shows on TV without really paying attention. It was good to have her there, to not be alone with my thoughts. But eventually, she had to go home to her own kids. You call me if you need anything, she said as she was leaving. Anytime, day or night, you hear me? I hear you. Thank you, Claire, for everything. After she left, the silence came back. I tried to keep myself busy. Did some laundry, watered my plants, cleaned the kitchen that didn't need cleaning. Anything to avoid thinking about Daniel, about last night, about the look on his face when he'd said I'd held him back. Monday morning came, and still no call. I went through my usual routine: coffee, devotional reading, a walk around the block even though my heart wasn't in it. When I got back, there were 2 messages on my answering machine. My heart raced as I pressed play. Maybe it was Daniel. Mrs. Thomas, this is William Porter. His gentle voice filled my kitchen. I just wanted to check on you and make sure you're doing all right after Saturday night. If you need anything, or if you just want to talk, please don't hesitate to call me. I left my number with the operator. Take care. The second message started, and my breath caught. It was a male voice, but not Daniel's. Mrs. Thomas, this is James Harrison. I wanted to reach out personally to apologize again for what happened at dinner Saturday night. I also wanted you to know that I've had a conversation with Daniel, and he is no longer being considered for the managing partner position. His employment with Harrison and Associates will continue for now, but he will not be advancing in the way he hoped. I thought you should know. I hope you're well. I played both messages again, then a third time. William had called to check on me. Mr. Harrison had called to tell me about Daniel's consequences, but Daniel himself, nothing. The silence from my son was louder than any words could have been. Tuesday afternoon, I was in my garden pulling weeds. My hands needed something to do, something to control, when a car I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. My stomach clenched. But it wasn't Daniel. It was a young woman in professional clothes carrying a briefcase. Ms. Thomas, she called out as she approached. I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Jennifer Cole. We met on Saturday night at the dinner. I remembered her, Mr. Harrison's executive assistant, the one in the burgundy dress. I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees. Yes, I remember. Is something wrong? No, not at all. I was hoping I could speak with you for a moment. It won't take long. I invited her inside and offered her something to drink, but she politely declined. We sat in my living room, and she looked around at the photos on the mantel. The worn but comfortable furniture, the life I'd built in this house. Mrs. Thomas, I want to be direct with you, Jennifer said. Mr. Harrison asked me to reach out because he was concerned after Saturday's events. He wanted to make sure you were okay, and also to extend an invitation. An invitation? Or Mr. Harrison has a charitable foundation. It supports various causes, but one of his pet projects is a program that provides companionship and support for elderly individuals who have been, she paused delicately, let down by their families. He thought you might be interested in getting involved, either as a participant or as a volunteer helping others in similar situations. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. He thinks I need charity. No, Jennifer said quickly. That's not it at all. He was impressed by your dignity on Saturday night. By your honesty. He said you reminded him of his late wife, someone with real character. He thought you might find value in connecting with others who understand what it's like when family doesn't live up to expectations. I looked down at my hands, still dirty from the garden. I appreciate the thought, but I'm not sure I'm ready for something like that. I understand. But please take this. She handed me a card with information about the foundation. No pressure. Just know that there are people and resources available if you need them. After she left, I sat holding that card for a long time. A foundation for people let down by their families. Is that what I was now? One of those sad cases people felt sorry for. But then I thought about what Claire had said, that there was nothing small about the life I'd lived, about the sacrifices I'd made. Maybe I had been let down. But maybe that said more about Daniel than it did about me. Wednesday brought more silence from Daniel. I found myself checking my phone constantly, even though I'd told him not to call. I hated myself for wanting to hear from him, for still hoping he'd apologize and make this right. Thursday morning. I was washing breakfast dishes when the phone finally rang. My heart leaped into my throat as I grabbed it. Hello, Ma. Daniel's voice was flat, emotionless. Not, I'm sorry, not, how are you? Just, we need to talk. I'm listening, I said, gripping the phone tight. I don't appreciate what you did on Saturday night. You embarrassed me in front of my boss and my colleagues. You cost me a promotion I'd been working toward for years. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I embarrassed you. Daniel, you lied to me. You used me. I asked you for a simple favor. One evening, and you couldn't even do that without making it into some big dramatic thing. You asked me to pretend to be engaged to a stranger. You put me in an impossible situation. I gave you a chance to be part of something important, to actually contribute to my success for once instead of just guilting me about not visiting enough. Each word was like a physical blow. Is that really what you think? That I've never contributed to your success? What did you ever do, Ma? You sent me to a state school, not even a good one. You couldn't afford to help me with anything after that. I built my career on my own, on a foundation we gave you, I said, my voice shaking. Your father and I worked ourselves to exhaustion so you could go to any college at all, so you could focus on your studies instead of working 3 jobs like we did. We gave you everything we had, and it wasn't enough. Daniel's voice rose. It was never enough. Do you know what it was like, being the kid whose parents drove an old car and lived in a tiny house? Being the one who couldn't afford the trips and the new clothes and everything my friends had. I swore I'd be different. And you do have more, I said quietly. More money, more success, more of everything. Except character. Except integrity. Except the ability to see that the people who loved you gave you what actually mattered. Don't lecture me about what matters. You don't understand the world I live in, the pressure, the competition. You're right. I don't understand a world where you use your own mother as a prop, where you lie to people who trust you, where you value a promotion more than you value being a decent human being. I can't believe you're turning this around on me. You're the one who ruined everything. No, Daniel. You ruined it. The moment you decided to lie, to manipulate, to treat people like tools instead of human beings. You did that. Not me. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Daniel said, his voice cold, I think we need some space from each other. A bitter laugh escaped me. Space? Daniel, we've had nothing but space for years. You barely visited, barely called. The only time you showed up was when you needed something from me. That's not fair. It's completely fair. And you know what? You're right, we do need space. Because I need time to figure out if I can forgive you for this. And you need time to figure out what kind of man you want to be. So that's it. You're just giving up on me. I'm not giving up on you. I'm giving up on pretending that things are okay when they're not. I'm giving up on making excuses for you. I'm giving up on accepting crumbs of your attention and being grateful for them. You're being dramatic. I'm being honest. For the first time in a long time, I'm being completely honest. I love you, Daniel. I will always love you. But I don't like who you've become. And until you can look at yourself honestly and take responsibility for what you did, I don't think we have anything more to say to each other. Fine. His voice was hard now. If that's how you want it. It's not how I want it. It's just how it has to be. I heard him take a breath, like he was going to say something else. But then he just hung up. I stood there holding the phone until the dial tone turned into that awful beeping sound. Then I carefully placed it back in the cradle and walked to my bedroom. I lay down on the bed I'd shared with Robert for 35 years, and I cried harder than I had since the day he died, because I'd lost my son, not to death, but to something worse, to greed and pride and a desperate need to be more than what he came from. I'd lost him to a world that valued the wrong things, that taught him to see his own mother as too small, too simple, too insufficient. Claire came by that evening. I'd called her after I'd cried myself out, and she held me while I told her about the phone call. He'll come around, she said, but she didn't sound convinced. What if he doesn't? Then you'll survive. You're stronger than you think, Miss Maggie. But I didn't feel strong. I felt broken and old and so tired. That night, after Claire left, I sat in my living room looking at all those photos of Daniel, baby Daniel, toddler Daniel, teenager Daniel, graduate Daniel. When had he changed? When had he stopped being the boy who'd loved me and turned into the man who'd used me? Or had he always been this way, and I'd just been too blind to see it? I took down the most recent photo, Daniel in his expensive suit at some company event, smiling that charming smile. I looked at it for a long time, searching for some trace of the son I remembered, but all I saw was a stranger. I put the photo in a drawer. Not throwing it away. I couldn't do that, but not looking at it every day either. Maybe someday I'd be able to look at it without feeling this crushing weight in my chest. But not today. The house was quiet as I got ready for bed. It had been quiet for years. But this was a different kind of quiet. This was the quiet of a door closing, of a chapter ending, of a mother letting go of the idea of who she thought her child was and accepting the reality of who he'd become. As I lay in the dark, I thought about what Mr. Harrison had said. Character matters. How we treat the people who can't do anything for us, that's who we really are. Daniel had failed that test. But I didn't have to fail it too. I didn't have to become bitter and hard and closed off. I could choose to be better than what had been done to me. I just wasn't sure how yet. The weeks that followed were some of the loneliest of my life. Not because I was alone. I'd been alone since Robert passed. But because now I was alone in a different way. I was alone with the knowledge that my son didn't value me, didn't respect me, maybe didn't even really love me the way I'd always believed he did. November turned colder. I watched the leaves fall from the oak tree in my front yard one by one, until the branches were bare and gray against the sky. It felt like a metaphor for my life, everything stripped away, leaving only the skeleton of what had been. Claire came by 3 times a week now instead of once. She never said it was because she was worried about me, but I knew that's what it was. She'd bring food, or tell me stories about her kids, or just sit with me while we watched game shows. She was trying to fill the silence, and I loved her for it even though nothing could really fill the hole Daniel had left. The card from Mr. Harrison's foundation sat on my kitchen counter for 2 weeks before I finally picked up the phone and called. A cheerful woman answered and told me about their weekly meetings at a community center downtown. Support groups, she called them, people who'd been disappointed by their families, who felt isolated, who needed connection. You don't have to share if you don't want to, the woman said. Some people just come to listen. But we find that being around others who understand can be healing. I almost hung up, almost said thank you and went back to my quiet house and my empty days. But something stopped me. Maybe it was Claire's voice in my head saying I was stronger than I thought. Maybe it was just the desperate need to feel less alone. When is the next meeting? I heard myself ask. That's how I found myself walking into the Riverside Community Center on a gray Tuesday afternoon in late November. The building was old but well maintained, with meeting rooms and a small gymnasium and the smell of coffee brewing somewhere. A woman about my age with kind eyes and silver hair greeted me at the door. You must be Margaret, she said warmly. I'm Dorothy. I coordinate the group. Come on in, you're just in time. She led me to a room where about a dozen people sat in a circle of folding chairs. They ranged in age from maybe 50 to well into their 80s. Some were white, some were black, some were Hispanic. Men and women, all with the same look in their eyes. A mixture of sadness and resignation and something else I couldn't quite name. Everyone, this is Margaret, Dorothy announced. She's joining us for the first time today. Margaret, why don't you sit here next to Helen? I sat down next to a tiny white woman with bright blue eyes and hands twisted with arthritis. She smiled at me and patted my knee. First time is always the hardest, honey, but you're in good hands here. The meeting started with Dorothy explaining the format for anyone new, which was just me that day. We're here to support each other, she said. No judgment, no advice unless it's asked for. Just listening and understanding. Who'd like to share today? A black man in his 70s raised his hand. I'll go. My name's Robert. He paused and looked at me. Not the same Robert as your late husband, I'm guessing, but a Robert nonetheless. I've been coming here for 6 months now. My daughter moved me into a nursing home last year so she could sell my house and keep the money. Told me it was for my own good, that I couldn't take care of myself anymore. He laughed bitterly. I was taking care of myself just fine. But I wasn't useful to her the way my house was. Others nodded knowingly. A Hispanic woman spoke next. My son only calls when he needs money. Last month he asked me to co-sign a loan. When I said no, he told me I was selfish. That after everything he did for me, visiting me twice last year, I owed him. One by one, people shared their stories. Children who had stolen from them. Children who had abandoned them. Children who used guilt and manipulation to get what they wanted. With each story, I felt my chest grow tighter. These weren't monsters they were talking about. They were people's children. Loved ones who had somehow forgotten that love was supposed to go both ways. When the circle came around to me, I felt everyone's eyes turn my direction. Dorothy smiled encouragingly. You don't have to share if you're not ready, Margaret. But suddenly, I was ready. I was so ready. My name is Margaret Thomas, I began, my voice shaky. My son asked me to be his fake fiancée. And then I told them everything. About Daniel and the dinner and the lies and the parking lot confrontation. About him saying my life was small. About the phone call where he blamed me for ruining his promotion. About the silence that had followed. When I finished, I was crying. But I wasn't the only one. Helen beside me was dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Robert was shaking his head. A younger woman across the circle was openly weeping. You did the right thing, Dorothy said firmly. Standing up for yourself, refusing to play along with the lies. That took courage. It doesn't feel like courage, I said. It feels like I failed as a mother. If I'd raised him right, he wouldn't be this way. No. The word came from a woman I hadn't heard speak yet. She was maybe 60 with gray streaks in her dark hair and wise, sad eyes. No, Margaret, you didn't fail. Sometimes people make choices that have nothing to do with how they were raised. Sometimes they choose comfort over character, money over morality. That's on them, not on you. But how do you live with it? I asked. How do you live with knowing your child doesn't value you? The room was quiet for a moment. Then Helen spoke up in her quavery voice. You learn to value yourself. That's how. You stop waiting for them to see your worth and you start seeing it yourself. It's the hardest thing in the world, Robert added, to let go of who you thought your child was and accept who they actually are. But holding on to the fantasy just keeps you trapped in pain. We talked for another hour. About grief and disappointment and the specific kind of heartbreak that comes from being failed by the people you raised. But we also talked about resilience. About finding purpose outside of being someone's parent. About building lives that meant something even when our children weren't part of them. When the meeting ended, several people came up to hug me. Dorothy handed me a schedule of upcoming meetings and her phone number. Call me anytime, she said, day or night, and please come back next week. As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. A tiny spark of hope. Not hope that Daniel would change or that things would go back to the way they were, but hope that maybe, just maybe, I could survive this. That I could build a life that mattered even without my son in it. The next morning, I called the number on the card Jennifer Cole had given me. The one for Mr. Harrison's foundation. I told them I wanted to volunteer. We have several programs, the coordinator explained. Friendly visitor services, where volunteers spend time with isolated seniors. Meal delivery. Transportation assistance. What interests you? The visiting program, I said without hesitation. I'd like to spend time with people who might be lonely. Because if I couldn't help my own son see my value, maybe I could help someone else feel valued. Maybe I could take this pain and turn it into something useful. They did a background check and scheduled me for training. 2 weeks later, I was matched with my first assignment, a 92-year-old woman named Alice Chen who lived alone in a subsidized housing complex across town. Her children lived on the West Coast and rarely visited. I was nervous driving to meet her that first time. What if she didn't like me? What if I didn't know what to say? What if I just made things worse? But when Alice opened her apartment door, a tiny woman with snow-white hair and a pink cardigan, she smiled like I was the best thing she'd seen in weeks. You're Margaret, she asked. Come in. Come in! I made tea. Do you have cookies too? Her apartment was small but immaculately kept. Photos covered every surface, children, grandchildren, a handsome man who must have been her late husband. She showed me each one, telling me stories about vacations and holidays and birthdays. My daughter calls every month, Alice said, her voice trying to sound upbeat. She's very busy with her job, very important. And my son, he sends cards for my birthday. They're good children, I'm very lucky. But her eyes told a different story. They held the same loneliness I'd been living with, the same ache of not being enough of a priority for the people you'd prioritized your whole life. I'm sure you are lucky, I said gently. But it's okay to wish they were here more often. You're allowed to want that. Alice's eyes filled with tears. Is it? Because I feel so guilty. They have their own lives. I shouldn't need so much attention. It's not too much to want your children to remember you, I said, taking her hand. You raised them. You loved them. You deserve to be loved back. We talked for 2 hours that first visit. About her childhood in San Francisco, about her husband who'd been a pharmacist, about her years as a schoolteacher, about the grandchildren she barely knew because they lived so far away, about holidays spent alone. When I finally left, promising to come back next week, Alice hugged me tight. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me." Driving home, I cried. But they weren't tears of sadness this time. They were tears of recognition. I'd seen myself in Alice, the woman who'd given everything and gotten so little back, who felt guilty for wanting basic consideration from her own children. But I'd also seen something else. I'd seen that I could make a difference. That my life didn't have to be about Daniel and his rejection. That I could choose to matter to people who actually wanted me around. Over the next few weeks, I fell into a new rhythm: support group on Tuesdays, visiting Alice on Thursdays, church on Sundays where I'd started volunteering with the Ladies' Auxiliary. Claire still came by regularly, and I'd started having her bring her kids sometimes. 10-year-old Sophia and 7-year-old Miguel brought energy and laughter into my quiet house, and I'd teach them to bake cookies or help with their homework. My phone still didn't ring with calls from Daniel, but I stopped checking it every 5 minutes. I stopped jumping every time I heard a car in the driveway, hoping it might be him. One Tuesday at the support group, Dorothy asked me to share how I was doing. "I'm angry," I said, surprising myself with the honesty. I spent weeks being sad and heartbroken, but now I'm just angry. Angry that I wasted so many years making excuses for Daniel. Angry that I let him make me feel small, when there was nothing small about loving him the way I did. Angry that he gets to just move on with his life while I'm here picking up the pieces. "Anger is good," Helen said, nodding vigorously. "Anger means you're done being a victim. Anger means you're ready to take your life back." "But what do I do with it?" I asked. "I can't just call him up and yell at him. That won't change anything." "So don't do it for him," Robert said. "Do it for you. Write him a letter, say everything you need to say, and then you decide if you want to send it or not. Sometimes just getting it out is enough." That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a pad of paper and a pen. I started writing. "Dear Daniel, I need you to know what you did to me. I need you to understand that it wasn't just one bad night. It was the culmination of years of feeling like I didn't matter to you, like I was an obligation instead of a blessing." The words poured out, page after page, everything I'd been holding in, all the hurt and disappointment, and yes, the anger. I wrote about the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd given, the hopes I'd had for who he'd become. I wrote about the man in the parking lot who'd called my life small, and how those words had cut deeper than he'd probably ever know. I wrote until my hand cramped and my tears blurred the ink, and when I was done, I had 7 pages of truth. I folded them carefully and put them in an envelope, wrote Daniel's address on the front, and then I put it in my desk drawer. I didn't send it. Not that day, anyway, because I realized that Robert was right. Just writing it had been enough. I'd said what I needed to say, gotten it out of my heart and onto paper where I could see it clearly. Maybe someday I'd send it, maybe I wouldn't. But either way, I'd found my voice again. The voice that Daniel had tried to silence, that I'd been silencing myself for years by making excuses and pretending things were okay when they weren't. December arrived with its first snow. I woke up one morning to find my yard covered in white, the world quiet and clean and full of possibility. I made myself coffee and stood at my window watching the flakes fall. My phone rang and my heart didn't even jump anymore. It was Claire, calling to check on me like she did most mornings now. "You okay, Miss Maggie? Roads are pretty bad out there?" "I'm fine, honey. Just watching it snow? You sound different." Better. Was I better? I thought about it. The ache was still there when I thought about Daniel, the wound was still raw. But I was learning to carry it differently, learning to be more than just a mother whose son had disappointed her. "I think I am better," I said. "Not healed, but better." "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Claire said. "I'm proud of you? You know that." After we hung up, I got dressed and made myself breakfast. Real breakfast, not just coffee and sadness. I was meeting Alice later, and I'd promised to bring my sugar cookies. I had the support group tomorrow. On Thursday, I was helping serve lunch at the church's community meal program. My life wasn't empty. It wasn't small. It was full of people who actually wanted to spend time with me, who valued my presence, who saw me as more than just useful. Daniel had been wrong about so many things, but he'd been especially wrong about my life being small. My life was exactly the size it needed to be, and for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. Christmas was 2 weeks away, and for the first time in years I wasn't dreading it. In the past, the holiday had become a source of anxiety. Would Daniel come? Would he cancel at the last minute? Would he show up for an hour and spend the whole time on his phone? This year, I didn't have to wonder. I knew he wouldn't be coming. And instead of that knowledge crushing me, it freed me. Claire had invited me to spend Christmas with her family. Alice had asked me to join her for Christmas Eve dinner at her apartment complex's community room. The church was organizing a gift drive for children in foster care, and I'd volunteered to help wrap presents and organize the distribution. My calendar was full, not with Daniel, but with people who actually wanted me there. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I'd just gotten home from the support group meeting. We'd had a good session. Robert had shared that his daughter had finally called to apologize for how she'd treated him. It gave everyone hope, seeing that sometimes people did come around. Though Dorothy had been quick to remind us that healing ourselves couldn't depend on others changing. I was in my kitchen making soup when I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the window, I saw a silver sedan that looked familiar, and my stomach tightened. Daniel's car. For a moment I thought about not answering the door. I'd been doing so well, building my life back up piece by piece. Did I really want to let him in, potentially to tear it all down again? But I was also curious. It had been almost 2 months since that phone call. 2 months of silence. Why was he here now? I turned off the stove and walked to the front door. Through the frosted glass, I could see Daniel standing on my porch, his hands shoved in the pockets of his wool coat. He looked thinner than I remembered. Tired, I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Daniel? Ma! He shifted his weight from foot to foot. Can I come in? It's cold out here. I wanted to say no. Wanted to tell him he'd lost the right to my warmth months ago. But I stepped aside and let him enter. He walked into the living room, looking around like he was seeing it for the first time. Or maybe seeing it differently. He noticed, I think, that his most recent photos were no longer on display. That the house looked lived in, but not by someone waiting for him to come home. You want some coffee? I asked, my voice neutral. No thanks. I can't stay long. Of course he couldn't. I sat down in my armchair, the one Robert used to sit in, and waited. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. Daniel remained standing, running his hand through his hair in that nervous gesture he'd had since childhood. So, I wanted to talk to you about what happened. About the dinner and everything after. Okay. He seemed thrown by my lack of reaction. He'd probably expected me to jump up, to hug him, to tell him how much I'd missed him. The old me would have. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I've been thinking a lot, he continued. About what you said. About what I did. And I wanted to explain. Explain what? Why you used me, why you lied to me, why you told me my life was small. The words came out calmer than I felt. I understand, Daniel. You wanted a promotion. You were willing to do anything to get it, including sacrificing your relationship with me. It's pretty simple. It's not that simple. Actually, it is. You made choices. You chose to lie, to manipulate, to value money and status over treating people, including your own mother, with basic respect and honesty. Those were your choices. Daniel's face flushed. I came here to apologize, and you're attacking me. I'm not attacking you. I'm stating facts. And I notice you haven't actually apologized yet. He stared at me. I just said I came here to apologize. Saying you came to apologize isn't the same as actually apologizing. So go ahead, I'm listening. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it again, sat down heavily on the couch. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry I put you in that situation. I'm sorry things went the way they did. Sorry things went the way they did, I repeated. Not sorry for what you did. Sorry it didn't work out the way you planned. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? Daniel, do you actually regret lying to me? Using me? Or do you just regret getting caught? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You don't understand the pressure I was under. The opportunity that was at stake. I needed to show Mr. Harrison that I was the right person. But being the wrong person. I shook my head. Do you hear yourself? You thought you could show him you had character by lying and manipulating people. That's not how character works, baby. Don't call me that, he snapped. Don't call me baby like I'm still a child you can lecture. Then stop acting like one. Take responsibility. Give me a real apology, not an explanation full of excuses. Daniel stood up abruptly, pacing across the room. You know what? I don't need this. I came here to try to make things right. And you're just throwing it back in my face? No, you came here to make yourself feel better. To ease your conscience so you can move on without this weighing on you. but you haven't done anything to actually make things right. You haven't acknowledged what you did wrong. You haven't shown any real remorse. You just want me to forgive you so you don't have to feel bad anymore. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Daniel. I worked 2 jobs so you could go to college. Your father worked himself into an early grave providing for us. We sacrificed everything for you. And what did you do with those sacrifices? You turned into someone who thinks the ends justify the means. Someone who uses people! I'm successful! I make good money! I have a career! Isn't that what you wanted from me? I wanted you to be a good man, I said, my voice breaking for the first time. That's all I ever wanted. Not rich, not powerful. Just good, just decent, just someone who treated others with kindness and respect. But somewhere along the way you forgot that. Or maybe you never learned it. And I have to live with wondering if that's my fault. It's not your fault, Ma. Daniel's voice softened. I made my own choices. You did the best you could. Did I? Because my best produced a man who would use his own mother as a prop in a lie. So maybe my best wasn't good enough. Don't say that. Why not? It's what you think. You said it yourself. I held you back. My small life, my modest house, my simple way of living, it embarrassed you. Made you feel less than? Daniel sank back down on the couch, his head in his hands. I was angry when I said that. Defensive. I didn't mean it. Yes, you did. People say what they really think when they're angry. The filters come off, and the truth comes out. And your truth is that you're ashamed of where you came from. Ashamed of me. That's not true. Then look me in the eye and tell me you're proud to be my son. Tell me you value what your father and I gave you, not the college education, not the opportunities, but the love and the values and the example of how to treat people. Tell me that meant something to you. Daniel looked up, and I saw tears in his eyes. But he didn't say the words. He couldn't, because we both knew it would be a lie. The silence stretched between us, heavy and sad. I think you should go, I said finally. Ma, please. I'm not kicking you out of my life, Daniel. But I'm also not going to pretend that everything is okay when it's not. You hurt me, deeply. And a 5-minute conversation where you make excuses isn't going to fix that. Then what will fix it? What do you want from me? I thought about that question. What did I want? An apology would be nice, a real one. But more than that, I want you to do some soul searching, I said. I want you to look at the man you've become and ask yourself if that's who you want to be. I want you to figure out what actually matters in life. Because right now, you seem to think it's money and promotions and impressing people who don't really care about you. And I want you to decide if having a relationship with me is something you actually value, or if I'm just an obligation you'd rather be rid of. Of course I value you. Then act like it, not with words, with actions, with choices, with how you treat me and talk to me and include me in your life. Or don't include me, but make a real choice and commit to it. I'm done being something you check off your list twice a year. Daniel stood up slowly. I don't know if I can be who you want me to be. I don't want you to be anyone but yourself. But I also don't have to accept being treated poorly just because you're my son. I love you, Daniel. I will always love you. But I also need to love myself enough to set boundaries. And my boundary is this: you don't get to use me, lie to me, and dismiss me, and then act like I'm the problem for being hurt by it. He walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. What if I can't change? What if this is just who I am? Then you need to decide if that's someone you're proud to be. And I need to decide if that's someone I can have in my life. Daniel left without saying goodbye. I watched through the window as he sat in his car for a long time, his head resting on the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to run out there, to comfort him like I had when he was a boy. But I stayed where I was. Because he wasn't a boy anymore. And I wasn't the woman who would sacrifice her own dignity just to keep the peace. After his car pulled away, I went back to my soup. My hands were shaking, and my eyes were burning with unshed tears, but I also felt something else. Something I hadn't expected to feel. Pride. I'd stood my ground. I'd told him the truth. I hadn't made excuses for him or for myself. I hadn't backed down just because it was uncomfortable. That evening, I called Claire and told her what happened. How do you feel? She asked. Like I just survived a battle, I said, but also like I might have won something. You did win something. You won your self-respect back. Later that night I pulled out the letter I'd written to Daniel. The one that had been sitting in my drawer for weeks. I read through it again, and I realized that I'd already said everything in it when he was here. The letter had been practice. Preparation for the moment when I'd need to speak my truth to his face. I tore it up and threw it away. I didn't need it anymore. The next morning my phone rang. It was William Porter. Mrs. Thomas, Maggie. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. I wanted to check in on you, and I wanted to let you know that Mr. Harrison asked me to tell you something. What's that? I wanted you to know that Daniel resigned from the company yesterday afternoon. Apparently he decided to take a position with another firm. Mr. Harrison said to tell you that sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they can start climbing back up. He thought you'd want to know. Daniel had quit. Or been forced out. Either way, his grand plan for success at Harrison and Associates was over. Thank you for telling me, William. There's something else, he said hesitantly. I wondered if perhaps you'd like to have lunch sometime. Just as friends. I enjoyed our conversation that night, brief as it was. And I think you're a remarkable woman. I smiled for the first time that day. I'd like that, William. I'd like that very much. We made plans for lunch the following week. Nothing romantic. Just two people who'd been through something difficult together and had come out the other side with mutual respect. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet kitchen and thought about everything that had happened. Daniel's visit, William's call. The life I was building without my son at the center of it. It wasn't the life I'd imagined. It wasn't the life I'd wanted. But it was becoming a life I could be proud of. A life where I mattered. A life where I was more than just someone's mother who didn't measure up. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from Alice. Can't wait to see you Thursday. I'm making my famous dumplings. Then another text from Sophia, Claire's daughter, Miss Maggie. Can you teach me to make Christmas cookies this weekend? And another, from Dorothy, reminder support group tomorrow at 2 p.m. We're doing a holiday potluck after. Bring whatever you'd like. My life wasn't empty. It wasn't small. It was full of people who chose to be in it. People who valued me. People who saw me. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. 3 months later, in early March, I was in my garden planting tulip bulbs when I heard a car pull into my driveway. I'd learned not to get my hopes up anymore. It was usually Claire, or sometimes William stopping by after his shift driving Mr. Harrison around the city. But when I looked up, shielding my eyes from the spring sun, I saw Daniel's car, again. My heart didn't race this time. I just felt tired. We'd been here before, in December. He'd come, we'd talked, he'd left. Nothing had changed. In the 3 months since, I'd heard from him exactly twice. A generic, Happy New Year, text and a card for Valentine's Day with no message inside, just his signature. I stood up slowly, brushing dirt from my knees, and waited. This time, I wasn't going to meet him halfway. Daniel got out of his car, and I noticed immediately that he looked different. His hair was longer, less perfectly styled. He wore jeans and a sweater instead of one of his expensive suits. And his face, there was something softer about it, less sharp and defensive. "Hi, Ma," he said quietly as he approached. "Daniel, I know you probably don't want to see me, but I was hoping we could talk, really talk this time." I studied him for a long moment, then I nodded toward the porch. "All right, let's sit." We settled into the old wicker chairs Robert had bought at a yard sale 20 years ago. The cushions were faded, the wicker slightly unraveled in places, but they were comfortable. Daniel sat carefully, like he was afraid the chair might collapse under him. "So," I said, "you wanted to talk." He took a deep breath. "I've been in therapy since January, 3 times a week." That surprised me. Therapy? Yeah, after I left Harrison and Associates, after our conversation in December, I realized something had to change. I couldn't keep going the way I was going. So I found a therapist who specializes in family relationships and issues with achievement and self-worth. I didn't say anything, just waited for him to continue. "She's been helping me understand why I made the choices I made, why I was so desperate for success that I was willing to hurt people. Hurt you, to get it." He paused, his eyes on his hands. "It doesn't excuse what I did. Nothing excuses it. But I'm starting to understand where it came from." "Where did it come from?" I asked, genuinely curious. Daniel was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Growing up, I always felt like I had to prove something. Like I had to be better than where I came from to be worth something. And I know." He held up a hand as I started to speak. "I know that's not your fault. You and Dad never made me feel that way. But society did. My friends did. The world I wanted to be part of did." He looked up at me now, and I saw real pain in his eyes. "In college, I was the scholarship kid. The one whose parents couldn't just write a check when I needed books or new clothes, or wanted to go on spring break. I watched my roommates throw money around like it was nothing, and I told myself that someday I'd be like them. I'd never have to worry about money. I'd never have to feel less than. But you weren't less than, Daniel. You were working hard, earning your way. I know that now. But back then, I felt like I was always one step behind, always struggling while everyone else was coasting. And when I finally got my job, when I finally started making good money, it was like I'd won something, like I'd escaped. Escaped what? He looked around my yard, at my modest house, at the life I'd built here. I'm sorry, Ma, but that's the truth. I felt like I'd escaped from being ordinary, from being working class, from being someone people could look down on. The words hurt, but I'd asked for honesty. So when you brought me to that dinner, I was trying to use you to prove something about myself. That I was the kind of man who took care of his family, who had values, who was worthy of that position. He shook his head. But I did it in the most valueless way possible, by lying. By using you like a prop. By treating you like you weren't a person with feelings and dignity. Yes, I said simply. You did. And when you called me out on it, when Mr. Harrison found out, I blamed you. Because it was easier than admitting I'd sabotaged myself. That I'd thrown away everything I'd worked for, because I was so desperate to be seen a certain way that I forgot who I actually was. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. After I left Harrison and Associates, I took a job at a smaller firm, less prestigious, less money, but less pressure too, and I started therapy. And I started actually thinking about my life, not my career, my life, for the first time in years. What did you think about? About Dad. About how he worked himself to death, literally, trying to provide for us. How he never complained, never asked for recognition, just did what needed to be done. And about you. About how you worked double shifts and came home exhausted, and still made time to help with my homework, to cook dinner, to be present. His voice cracked. You gave me everything you had, and I looked at it like it wasn't enough. Like you'd failed me somehow by not being richer, by not being able to give me more. But the truth is, you gave me what mattered most. You gave me your time, your attention, your love. And I threw it away because I was too blind to see its value. Tears were rolling down his cheeks now. I'm so sorry, Ma. I'm so sorry for what I did. For how I treated you. For the things I said. You didn't deserve any of it. Your life isn't small, mine is. Mine has been small because I made it only about me, about what I could get, about how I could climb higher. I lost sight of what actually makes life meaningful. I felt my own eyes filling with tears. This was the apology I'd been waiting for. Not excuses, not deflection, but genuine remorse and understanding. And I know, Daniel continued, wiping his face with his sleeve, that I might have broken something that can't be fixed. I know you might not be able to forgive me, or trust me again, or want me in your life. And if that's the case, I'll respect it, but I needed you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did, why it was wrong, and how much I hurt you. And I'm truly, genuinely sorry. We sat in silence for a while. A bird sang in the oak tree. Somewhere down the street, children were playing. The world kept turning, indifferent to our small human drama. I forgive you, I said finally. Daniel's head snapped up. You do, I forgive you. But Daniel, forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. It doesn't mean I forget what happened, or that I trust you completely right away. It means I'm choosing not to carry anger and resentment anymore. It means I'm willing to see if we can build something new. Something new, he repeated. The relationship we had before, where you barely visited or called, where I made excuses for you, where I was always waiting for crumbs of your attention. That's done. I won't go back to that. If we're going to have a relationship moving forward, it has to be different. It has to be built on honesty and respect and actual presence, not just obligation. I want that, Daniel said quickly. I want to be present. I want to be better. Then you need to show me, not with words, but with actions. Consistent actions over time. Can you do that? I can try. I want to try. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Vulnerability, humility, a willingness to admit he'd been wrong. Okay, I said. Then let's start slow. Come for dinner next Sunday, just dinner, no expectations. We'll talk, we'll eat, and we'll see how it goes. I'd like that. Thank you, Ma. He stood to leave, but I stopped him. Daniel, one more thing. I need you to understand that I've built a life for myself in the past few months. I have friends, commitments, things I do that matter to me. I'm not sitting at home waiting for you to come around anymore. I know. William told me. We had coffee last week. He told me about the volunteer work you're doing, about the support group. I'm glad, Ma. I'm glad you're not alone. You had coffee with William. He reached out, said he thought I should know how you were doing, since I wasn't checking in myself. Daniel smiled slightly. He's a good man, very protective of you. He is a good man, I agreed. After Daniel left, I sat on the porch for a long time thinking. Part of me was hopeful. He'd done the work therapy. Self-reflection, a genuine apology. Maybe people really could change. But another part of me was cautious. I'd been hurt too deeply to just throw the door wide open again. Trust had to be earned back, piece by piece, visit by visit, month by month. Sunday came and Daniel showed up at 5 o'clock like he'd promised. He brought flowers, not expensive roses, but simple daisies from the farmer's market. We made dinner together, working side by side in my small kitchen. He asked about my week, about Alice and the support group, and my volunteer work. And he actually listened to the answers. We ate at the same table where I'd fed him breakfast every morning for 18 years. The conversation was sometimes awkward, sometimes halting, but it was real. He told me about his new job, about his therapy sessions, about an apartment he was thinking of renting that was closer to where I lived. You don't have to move closer just for me, I said. It's not just for you. It's for me too. My therapist asked me what I wanted my life to look like in 5 years, and I realized that all the things I thought I wanted, the big house, the prestigious title, the expensive car, they didn't actually make me happy. You know what I want? I want meaningful relationships. I want to know my neighbors. I want to be part of a community. I want to be the kind of person Dad was, steady, reliable, present. Your father was a good man, I said softly. He was, and I'm trying to figure out how to be more like him and less like whatever I was turning into. Over the following months, Daniel came for dinner every Sunday. Sometimes we talked about heavy things, his guilt, my hurt, the work we were both doing to heal. Sometimes we just watched a movie or played cards or worked in the garden together. He met Claire and her kids. He came to the church potluck and helped serve food. He even came with me once to visit Alice, and I watched him sit patiently while she told him stories about her teaching days, actually interested instead of checking his phone every 5 minutes. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when old patterns threatened to resurface, when he'd start talking only about himself, or when I'd start making excuses for behavior that didn't need excusing. But we were learning to catch ourselves, to call each other on it gently, to choose differently. One Sunday in late June, we were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching fireflies begin to appear in the gathering dusk. "Ma, can I tell you something?" Daniel asked. "Of course." I talked to Mr. Harrison, apologized to him for what I did. I didn't ask for anything, didn't try to justify it, just apologized. "How did that go?" He said he appreciated the apology, said real growth comes from admitting your mistakes, not from never making them. And then he said something that's been sticking with me. "What was that?" He said, "Your mother is a wealthy woman, and you were too foolish to see it." I asked him what he meant, and he said, "She's rich in character, in integrity, in the ability to love without keeping score. That's worth more than all the money I've made in my life, and you were treating her like she was worthless." Daniel's voice was thick with emotion. "He was right, Ma. You are rich, and I was too caught up in the wrong kind of wealth to see it." I reached over and took his hand. "We all lose our way sometimes, baby. What matters is finding your way back." Am I finding my way back? To you, I mean. To being your son in a way that means something. I thought about that question, about the months of consistent visits, about the therapy he was doing, about the genuine changes I'd seen in how he talked, how he listened, how he showed up. "Yes," I said. "I think you are." He squeezed my hand. "Thank you, for not giving up on me, for setting boundaries, for forgiving me. Thank you." As the summer wore on, something remarkable happened. I stopped measuring Daniel's love by how often he called or visited. I stopped looking for proof that I mattered to him, because I knew I mattered. I knew my life had value regardless of whether he saw it or not, and in that knowing, in that certainty of my own worth, our relationship found solid ground to build on. In August, Daniel brought someone to Sunday dinner. A woman named Lisa who worked in his office, who had a kind smile and asked thoughtful questions and laughed at my stories. They'd been dating for 2 months, he said, and he wanted me to meet her. I told her everything, Daniel said after Lisa excused herself to use the bathroom. About what I did, about my therapy, about how I'm trying to be better. She appreciated the honesty. "She seems lovely," I said. "She is. And she knows that my relationship with you is important to me, that you're a priority. If she couldn't accept that, it wouldn't work. I felt tears sting my eyes. This was who I'd raised him to be. This was the boy who'd gotten lost and finally found his way home. In September, I celebrated my 69th birthday. Daniel threw me a real party, at his new apartment that was indeed closer to my house. He invited Claire and her kids, Alice, William, people from my support group, friends from church. He'd made all my favorite foods, hung decorations, bought a cake from the bakery I loved. As I looked around at all these people who'd come into my life after Daniel had broken my heart, I realized something. His betrayal had cracked me open, yes. But it had also opened me up. Opened me up to new relationships, new experiences, new ways of understanding my own value. I wouldn't have chosen this path, wouldn't have chosen the pain. But I also couldn't deny that I was stronger now, more sure of myself, more connected to a community that actually saw me. Dorothy from the support group pulled me aside at one point. "Look at you," she said. "Remember when you first came to group? You were so broken, so convinced you'd failed as a mother. I remember. And now look, you've built this beautiful life, you've healed. And your son is healing too. That's not failure, Maggie. That's triumph." Later that evening, after everyone had left and it was just Daniel and me cleaning up, he said, "Ma, there's something I want to ask you." "What's that?" "Lissa and we're getting serious, and I think I'm going to ask her to marry me. But before I do, I wanted to make sure you're okay with it, that you like her. Daniel, you don't need my permission. I know. But I want your blessing. It matters to me." I thought about the young woman I'd met tonight. How she'd helped serve food without being asked. How she'd sat with Alice and looked through photos. How she'd looked at my son with love and patience and something that looked a lot like understanding. "You have my blessing," I said. "She's wonderful. And more importantly, she seems to bring out something good in you." "She does. She reminds me a lot of you, actually. The way you used to be, are, strong and kind, and not willing to accept less than honesty. Then you chose well." As I drove home that night, past the familiar streets of my neighborhood, I thought about how far I'd come. A year ago, I'd been a woman waiting by the phone, making excuses, diminishing myself to make room for a son who didn't appreciate her. Now I was a woman who knew her worth, who had boundaries, who had a life full of people who chose her just as she chose them, who could forgive without forgetting, who could love without losing herself. My house looked welcoming as I pulled into the driveway. The porch light was on. I'd left it on for myself, not waiting for someone else to come home. Inside, my small, supposedly insignificant life waited for me. But there was nothing small about it, nothing insignificant. It was full and rich and meaningful, full of volunteer work that helped others, full of friendships that sustained me, full of Sunday dinners with my son who was learning to be better, full of quiet mornings with coffee in my garden, full of purpose and connection and love. I walked up to my front door, past the flower beds I'd planted, past the chair where Robert used to sit on summer evenings, past all the small ordinary things that made up my supposedly small life, and I smiled. Because Daniel had been wrong about so many things. But he'd been most wrong about this. There was nothing small about a life lived with integrity. Nothing small about love given freely. Nothing small about a woman who knew her worth and refused to settle for less. My life was exactly the size it should be. And it was enough. More than enough, it was everything.